Hi everyone, welcome to the 14th episode of the Zicast. As always, I'm your host Ryan Ziaks, and today I'm joined by a fellow English and communications enthusiast, Paige Pezzella.
That's me, hey.
And from Gossip with Grace to the Zicast, I'd like to thank episode 5 guest, Caitlin Turner, for stepping in to TD this episode. Thank you, Kate.
Icon, legend.
Yes, exactly. And of course, I think you have a gist about what my podcast is about.
Yeah.
It's a way for me to get to know my friends on a deeper level because everyone has a story, all that good stuff. So with that all said, Paige, how about you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. My go-to, at least like university-wise, is always like, hi, I'm Paige. I'm a senior English and communications double major. I'm from Harrison, New York. That's like a very classic thing. But other things that I'll introduce myself with is usually like my involvement on campus. I was an orientation leader. I'm an admissions ambassador, so I give tours and all of that fun stuff. I'm in Q tonight for one semester only, which is exciting. And I was part of SPB, and just in general, I don't know. I love chatting, so I'm so excited to be here.
I always say I'm the yap whisperer, and that's what we do here.
Yeah. Okay, Caesar Milan.
Yes.
But yapping.
Yeah, a lot of great things, and that's kind of how we met when you were in OL and I was transferring in here.
Yeah.
And I was a yee lad.
When you were a small boy.
A small boy going into Quinnipiac.
Yeah.
You were one of the first friendly faces.
Oh.
So thank you for that.
I can't cry in the pod, Ryan, please.
Oh, that would be a fun moment.
You'd be like, I love this. This is so great.
Let's turn this into a reel. So yeah. I think you hit everything, and now we kind of get into the topic. So kind of what drew you to both English and communications?
Well, so coming to Quinnipiac, I came to an open house first, right? And I went to these interest meetings with theater. I was the only one that was interested in theater, so I had a personal interaction with one of the theater professors here, and she was lovely, and I was like, I love her, I love this school, I'm going here. And then I thought that I wanted to be a teacher. I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, and so I knew that we had a really good school of education here, so I was like, okay, I'm going to do education. My mom's a social worker, so, she's in education. My dad's an electrician, so he doesn't really know. He's like, yeah, teaching is a profession that's relatively stable to have. You should do that. So then I came in wanting to do education. And then I took my first English class. I realized that it was a lot more like writing and thinking than some of the classes were in high school, because so often in high school it was you get a book, you read it, and then sometimes you'll talk in class about it, but most of the time it was just the teacher yapping at you about what the book was about and whatever. So I really liked how much you could interact with the text that you were looking at and the professors, and I've always loved writing, I've always loved reading. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to double major. I'm actually going to major in English, and then I'm going to get a master's for both elementary and secondary education. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I want to do. I convinced myself. So I had English, and then during my first year of orientation, actually, for every day that we weren't doing academic registration for our school and our major. So when I wasn't doing the English major registration, I was in the School of Comm, and we were kind of randomly placed, but I was in the School of Comm, and every time I would get a be in one of those sessions, I'd learn about all the classes that they have to take and all the different majors that you can take, and I was like, this is really cool. Why did I never consider comm? Because to me it was so similar to theater, and it was so similar to English, and things that I liked in high school and my whole life, but didn't know there were actually jobs for. And I was like, oh, comm, maybe I should double major in that. And then going into my sophomore year, I majored in comm. But I did discover that I wanted to at orientation, which I think is kind of silly because it's meant for first year students, but I was kind of using it as my own way to find it.
And you got something out of it too.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I know whenever I tell people I'm an English major, they immediately think, oh, so you're going to be a school teacher.
Yeah, and it's no, I don't want to do that.
It's incredibly applicable.
It is.
And especially to you're in communications, me with film, is that there's, in the past, a lot of English classes or a lot of film courses were like English courses in terms of analyzing it. So there kind of is that synergy there.
Yeah, there is. And I think too, at least for me, I'm taking a creative producing class right now for my master's, and I always get on my high horse about like book to screen adaptations, because sometimes I'm like, I don't think that these people have read the books that they are basing a movie off of, and like it's really important to know the source material and to know where you're coming from, and like screenwriters are writers at the end of the day. Like you need to be well versed in not just movies but in like books and like other forms of media. So I feel like there's just like the connection makes so much sense. And oftentimes when I tell people that I'm English in communications, I'm like, English is in the College of Arts and Sciences. I think it should be in communications. Personally, I think that it fits so much into that.
That's a very good point. Yeah. And yeah, book to screen adaptation is always interesting, because I feel like the book is almost always better than the film, because you can expand the story. You can kind of, because of course with a film there's budgets, there's time constraints.
Yeah.
Where with a book it's just the author's vision and imagination.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some examples, kind of like, I would say like certain things like Dune. Like I would argue that like you should see the films before you read the books, because the books are so dense.
Yeah, aren't they like long and confusing kind of?
Very much so. So I would argue like you should watch the films to get invested in the stories, then go read in the books. But that was a bit of a yap session.
No, that's fine. I'll take it. I love book to screen adaptations. Like I'm a huge Harry Potter girly. I honestly was quite disappointed in the Percy Jackson show. I think that, which was confusing, because I'm like, I thought that Rick was like a producer on it. Like I thought that like he was like really involved in it, and it felt like they were. I think my issue with adaptations is not necessarily like being true to a story in a traditional sense of like including everything, because that's unrealistic. I think it's more like if you're going to make a different choice, like have a reason why you're making that different choice, and have it be like a good reason. Like I feel like for Percy Jackson, they like made plot points different for like no reason. Like there was no reason why like they had to miss the solstice date. Like there was no reason why, like, I don't know, like why like Annabeth was in the underworld to then just like not be there anymore. Like there were like a lot of random choices where I'm like, why are we doing this? And I feel like that's the beef that I have the most with adaptations, is when it's like the integrity of like what made the series so good is like not there. An adaptation that I love is the Shadow and Bone series. They had a show on Netflix. It was canceled because Netflix does that. Netflix loves to cancel their shows. But it was a trilogy, and then there was a duology that was set like later. But in the show, they combined the two timelines. So it was the trilogy timeline as well as the duology timeline. And I really liked that. I felt like it was really cool. And like the world was really well done. Some of the mistakes with like the main female character not really being super interesting was like fixed in the TV show. Like there was a lot of purposeful changes that were made that I really enjoyed. I heard it kind of fell off in the second season. I didn't finish it, but my favorite character showed up in the second season, so like that was fine. But like it felt like they did it a lot more justice than like other adaptations I've seen.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And it's just a great, interesting topic in general, because I remember a producer once spoke at the Quinnipiac Film Society, and he was adapting a novel into a film. So I asked him kind of what's the process of that, and he kind of said something very interesting, to paraphrase that, like books talk about like the internal lives of characters, so screenwriters kind of have to make the internal external.
Yes.
So that's just like a very, very kind of interesting thing in terms of like how writing a novel and writing a screenplay, they're both writing, but they're both very different types of writing.
Exactly.
And both very challenging in their own ways.
Yeah.
So I feel like that leads us really well into our next topic, which is kind of how you feel that English and communications kind of coexist and complement each other.
Yeah, well, I think that for one thing, I feel like I've no hate to my film friends, but sometimes like in my screenwriting class, I've read like screenplays for short screenplays that just like don't have the English conventions that like are needed to have to even be looked at. I feel like it's like one of those things where so often like this is a very like dog eat dog world in the film industry and stuff, but like if you're not using commas correctly or semicolons correctly, or if you're spelling things wrong, like it's going to be an immediate pass. Like that is just an immediate thing. So I feel like just in general, like being in a major where you're forced to draft things and redraft things and have people look at it, like peer review is such a big part of English that it forces you to become okay with that in film. I feel like so often with the film majors that I've met, we're very like protective over like the stuff that we do, and we don't want to share it with people because like God forbid they don't like something, and then it's like they don't like me because like it's your life force, you know. And I totally get that, but like having been in English classes, I feel like there's such a habit of like, you're going to show this to someone and they're going to give you constructive criticism, and like you're going to have to be able to take what they say, see what will work for you, what maybe doesn't work, and like that redrafting process I have gotten so much better at because of the English classes that I've taken. And I feel like that is like being willing to like take a first draft and be like, this isn't the best draft, is like a very English thing. And I feel like it connects a lot to communications, because so often like in creative fields, it's like, I don't know, we're the people with the ideas, you know, we're like the people that are supposed to have the ideas, and we're supposed to have like the best ideas, but like drafting and like redoing stuff is the biggest part. And I don't think I'd be as used to it if I wasn't in English.
That's very, very true. And yeah, I'm an English major, so I always know, like, looking at the grammar, things like that. And I think that's helped me, because I've written stories creatively long before I ever kind of got to a screenplay, and that's had both positive and negative effects, where the common complaint was, you don't need to put such novelistic descriptions in your screenplay. And I'm
whatever.
Like, how else do I write?
No, literally, like, whatever. Like,
I do my best. But yeah, and like that's something you just kind of, just in general, like with writing, is you kind of need to have that general grasp of it when doing anything, not even just writing screenplays. And you also talked about kind of like how you, like with first drafts. I feel that like being an English major and kind of turning in like creative works and getting that first draft and knowing that's a first draft kind of helps you with filmmaking, with like turning in a screenplay or turning in your film, like knowing people will look at it and send you back feedback. It becomes like second nature rather than being like, oh, I hope they don't hate it.
Yeah, we're like, I'm so nervous. Oh my God, I can't. And I feel like it also helps too with like you just getting it done. Like the hardest part of writing is actually starting to write. Like that's like the classic thing, is that like sometimes you just need to write. Like especially like if you're like writing a whole book or even like a whole series, like actually writing it is the most difficult part, because you have all these ideas and then you're like, I don't want to write, or like, oh, this sounds bad, or I don't like this. But like first drafts are not supposed to be good. First drafts can be like, okay, like your first draft could be better than like another person's first draft. But like your first draft should not be the best version of your work. And like that being in English has really taught me that for sure. I also feel like being in English has helped me really be good at dialogue. I am very proud of the dialogue that I write. I think that because screenplays are mostly dialogue heavy, like it is so easy to get it wrong and to get it all like to just sound not human.
Like wooden, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like sound like they're not real people. But I think that being in writing, even if you like only write academic essays or something, like it's always going to be in your voice, and you're going to find a way to say certain things and say things differently. And you're going to read scholars and you see how they say things. And like, if you watch a lot of movies, you can see how people say things. And like, sometimes like when I watch things and I like Shameless, for example, I love that show, but like they're quick-witted little quips, like just the dialogue is like nothing can be like taken out of it, because it just all like works together. Or even like Little Women, like the 2019 one with Greta Gerwig, like the way that she wrote the script was to have like lines on top of each other, and like it just sounds so natural. And like I feel like that's a very English thing too.
Yeah, like kind of like creating a rhythm to it. I know
exactly.
Aaron Sorkin, the screenwriter, like Social Network, for example, like there's like he compares it to like music.
Yeah.
Like there's like a rhythm and a pace to it that kind of create, like the way that he puts words together. I know that when working with David Fincher on that film, like he needs the actors to say the lines as they are.
Exactly.
Every word is like intricately placed, that it's not just, here are words, you can say whatever you want as long as you get to the gist of the idea. It's say the words as they're written. So I think that's kind of interesting, kind of novelistic way of like just putting together words to create those kinds of meetings.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's kind of how both sides can relate. So now also leads us very well into our next topic, and because I want to ask you about your interest in writing and the story you're working on. We talked about way back when.
Way back when. I mean, the thing is, like, I still like get embarrassed like talking about things that I'm working on, because I like forget that like if it is what I want to go into in the future, like, you know what I mean? Like in high school and in like middle school and like elementary school, like I would never talk about my writing with people, because it was just like something that I did like on my family computer. Like it wasn't like for anyone else to see. I always was like, it would be so cool to like publish things and like be a writer, but I was never like that's something that could actually happen. So I've always been like very secretive about the things that I write. But then I remember that like now I'm like, oh, like if I want this to be my job, like I should talk about it. So I've been working on like I'm trying to work on like a trilogy. I really love fantasy. I feel like writing fantasy in both books and screenplays is just like, the genre could be like so much. Like fantasy comedy is so interesting to me. Just like it's everything that every other genre is. It's just there's magic involved, and that's so cool. Like I think that's so cool. And like, why would you not write that every time you would write something then? If like you could just create a magic system or create something that does not exist in real life to then exist, but still have like themes that exist in real life. Like I eat that up. You know what I mean? I eat that so up. But I'm writing like it's intended to be a trilogy, and it's in essence what I want it to be about is that there are kind of like two sides, but both of the sides, as sides think that like the other side has worse morals or the other side has worse morals and blah blah blah, and they were fighting and they're separated. But at the end of the day, like a compromise needs to be made, and there's like a group of these, you know, teens that unknowingly have to figure out this compromise. And they don't go into like a journey or quest being like, oh, we're going to figure out the compromise. We're going to save everything. They go in for one reason and then are like literally almost like forced to because they went on the original journey. So it's kind of like a self-proclaimed chosen one type thing. I find that really interesting, where it's like nobody is technically the chosen one until you put yourself into like a prophecy, for example. So like they start fulfilling a prophecy, and then now all of a sudden they have to be the ones to do this because you guys started doing it. And I feel like that's an interesting concept where it's like we're like different from other chosen one tropes. It's like you have a choice, and then you still do it, and then now you have all this responsibility, and you're like, oh, like being the chosen one actually is like not super fun all the time, and like you have a choice, and then now that you've made it, you don't have a choice anymore. So like that's in essence what it's about. Like I don't know, I can get into more details, but like I don't know exactly, like I don't know.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And being the chosen one, not being all it's set out to be. Star Wars and Dune have entered the chat.
Exactly, and freaking Harry Potter too.
Potter, yes.
Yeah. At the end of every year, Lord Voldemort will attack. But yeah, I just feel like it's very like I want to be able to write fantasy stories that are familiar fantasy stories, but don't completely fit into like the tropes of so many fantasy stories. Like creating more, like having certain like countries be more modern in a sense, be more like almost like militant, technologically advanced, like not going to the traditional like European Western expectation of like what fantasy villages look like or what like, you know, castles and kingdoms and dragons and all of that stuff, but also still having that like I feel like I with this one specifically, I want to try to get the best of both worlds. You know what I mean? I want to try to get everything.
Quite literally.
Yeah, exactly.
So this story, I was envisioning it, maybe it's just where my head's at, like in space. So this is like our world just advanced.
Kind of. It's like one of those things where it's like a made up world, like a place that does not exist, but it's focusing on like an island with like two countries specifically. So in an ideal world, like I would write this trilogy and then expand to like a completely different place within the same magic system in the same world, so that the rules would still stay, but it would just be a different place and like a different culture or a different conflict that was happening. Kind of similar to Shadow and Bone, because that's like what kind of happens, is that you focus on like one cast of characters, and then years later you're still in the same world, but it's different people and it's a different culture now. I feel like that's really interesting. So it's like, it's not our world, like they don't know like who like David Bowie is, like like those things don't exist. They have like their own history, but it's kind of like still like a specific part of one world. I used to watch a lot of YouTube videos. It was, I forget what the YouTuber's name was, but she did a series called Dear Authors, and it was just a series where people like in her like Reddit group would like give suggestions to authors, particularly about fantasy, usually about like what they liked, what they didn't like, what they liked in main characters, what they liked in world building, what they didn't like. And like those things have stuck with me so specifically as I've been like going through the many stages of creating this throughout the year, simply from going from like a very like small middle school page idea to then like actually being like, oh no, like this is how I can actually do it and actually make it like a really complicated system and stuff like that. But one of the things that she talked about was like having your world, if you want to have a big world, making it feel big. And so like Lord of the Rings does a really good job of that, is that like the world is, you know, where they are, but I haven't read Lord of the Rings, but I know that it's like huge and like it feels very expansive because it's supposed to be like that. I'm sure like Game of Thrones is the same way. Harry Potter is because it's the actual world, but like even like the Hogwarts world and the Wizarding world is like within itself even more expansive than like the actual world. So I feel like that was kind of the energy that I wanted to give off, because part of me first, when I first started writing it, was like, oh, like this is the whole world. The whole world exists in these 2 countries and like that's it. And then I'm like, no, like that's unrealistic, 1. And 2, I don't really think that's as interesting. And it also would mean that like I feel like I would have to stop after a trilogy rather than like explore what other places might look like within like that magic system.
Spin-offs can make a lot of money.
Yeah, right? That's what I'm saying. I'm like, you got to use your IP.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And like I was thinking, like Lord of the Rings, they quite literally go on a trek through their whole world. So that's a kind of a great way to show off the world, to kind of build a world. And then you could do it in so many different ways, through throwaway lines that could become something more interesting.
That's something too that I'm so interested in. I think that what's taken me so long to like really write it is because I'm like, I want to make sure that everything that happens is going to be important later on, that I know exactly what like is going to happen, that I know all of the secrets that they're going to discover, even the really small ones. Like I want to know everything that happens, because then like especially in like a shorter series too, like some of the beef I have with Harry Potter is that it feels like as she was getting to the end of the book, she was like, yeah, this meant to be all along. And I'm like, did it? Or did you just like make it so that it fit for it to be all along? So like I wanted to make sure before I even like started writing again that like I knew exactly like what certain things would mean, how certain characters would react to certain things, and then like in the end, like how would they get to the end goal. I still don't know exactly how I want it to end, but I at least know like I think that like what secrets in terms of the magic they're going to figure out. And I feel like that is the most important part, because then for me, I'm like, once they figure that out, I feel like I'm naturally going to like go with them on like, okay, how can we use this in this situation that we need to fix? And then like it feels a lot more natural than if I like plan it and then for some reason I start writing and then I'm like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And I always say that we manifest things here on the Zicast.
Yeah.
So when you look back on this after they're bestsellers, years in the future, you'll be like, wow, that's where the seeds were planted.
Yeah, that's where they were planted. I love that. Yeah, no, for sure.
And speaking of manifesting things, you had an interest in being an intern at Sesame Street, and that's very, very fitting for you. So I'd like to kind of ask you about that whole process.
Yeah, so I didn't even know that, like, for some reason, like, for things that I love like that, I forget that, like, people need to work there in order for it to, like, exist. So, like, Sesame and, like, Sesame Workshop, I, like, didn't process that, like, people actually work there and people intern there and, like, you could be on Sesame Street until I went to an orientation. So many things from orientation, actually. Like, thank you, orientation. But I went to an orientation conference, and the diversity, equity, and inclusion like VP was speaking at our conference, like from Sesame Workshop, and then. So that's what I was focused on the entire time he was talking. I was like, Sesame Workshop, oh my God. And then at the end of his like whole thing, he was like, you know, we have internships, we have summer, fall, spring. And I was like, what? So then I added him on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey, I went on their job board, I applied to stuff. And then I met it's going to be orientation again. And then this summer, one of our alumni, she was an orientation leader. I was talking with my boss for orientation, Matt Kurz. Shout out Matt Kurz. Love him. Best mentor ever. But he was like, oh my God, I think she works at Sesame Workshop. You should totally reach out to her on LinkedIn and like say you're an orientation leader, you're the communications coordinator, you're really interested in getting on Sesame Street, all that stuff. so then I got in contact with her, and I've like been asking. I hate feeling like desperate. Like I hate feeling like please hire me, or like I really want to work here. But also at the same time, in one of my classes recently, we have like guest speakers sometimes, and like I had asked a question of like essentially like how do you get out there, and like how do you be okay with like putting yourself out there and stuff. And she was like, if you have someone who works at a company that you want to work at, like ask them to introduce you to people, ask them to let you know if any job openings open up, and like people like that. So I asked her that. I was like, hey, like, do you think you could introduce me to like someone on your creative team, or even like she does social media. She's actually responsible for when Elmo tweeted like how's everyone doing, that was her. So like she was behind that, which was really cool. And I was like, oh my god, I know her. And like I met with her and stuff like that. So that's like where I am now, just sort of like being okay with like reaching out and still applying for stuff, and just making sure to show my interest. And I mean, I've had a stuffed Elmo since I was like literally born. Like he was the first toy ever. I think it was my first word actually, was Elmo. It was not mom or dad, it was Elmo. I confirmed that with my parents actually when I went home last. Yeah.
Destiny.
Yeah, I know, right? So it was Elmo. Because who doesn't love Sesame Street? I love children's programming. As much as I would like to do like serious adult stuff, like I also think that there's so much joy and education in children's programming, and it's so intentional. Like I feel like whatever I do in the future, I want to be intentional with everything that I do. And so like stuff like Mr. Rogers inspired me so much. I watched in high school, senior year of high school, I remember so vividly, I watched a documentary about Mr. Rogers, and I started crying in class because I was like, I would just like to be like half of the person that Mr. Rogers is. And then it made me think about getting into children's programming and wanting to do that. I want to do a lot of things, but like I feel like my heart will always have a little special place for children's programming for sure. And then so like something like Mr. Rogers and like Sesame Street and like PBS Kids and all that stuff, like that's kind of what comes to mind. But yeah, I've just always loved it. I think it's just so great. Teach kids about like friendship, like My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Don't get me started because I love that show. And like it taught me so much as like a little, like an only child who like needed to make friends in like elementary and middle school. Like it taught me a lot about like how to be nice to your friends, how to communicate with your friends. And like I do genuinely think that I have better communication skills because like I watched shows like that. Yeah.
And children's programming, they can always use the energy.
Exactly. I would have so much energy. I would love it.
And I kind of like that whole story. You talk about the whole process of kind of learning about the program. And since I'll plug the Zicast, even on the Zicast, last episode, Catherine Tallman, she said that networking is just making friends.
Yes, I saw that clip. I was like, oh, yes, it is.
I literally released it today.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you were kind of able kind of use your people skills and made a lot of friends along the way and kind of learn about this whole thing.
Yeah. I think that like what is most nerve-wracking is that sometimes I'm like, I just don't want to ever like come off as too much. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to ever come off as like too eager for something, or honestly at the same time like not qualified enough for something. So I think that for something like film, for example, because I've really only gotten into it for my last few years here at Quinnipiac, and like I haven't been part of like a film organization until literally this semester, I kind of feel a little bit underqualified at times. But I think too, like part of me, like it's so hard because like so many of like the companies that you apply to, like they have like the automated like AI will read your resume, and if you don't have like the exact words that they want, like you'll automatically go to the rejection pile, which I hate. Like I just want to talk to people. But I feel like at times I'm like, part of me is just like, sometimes I'm like, just trust me. Like, just trust me that like sorry.
No worries.
Like I'm very self-taught in a lot of things. Like I asked, over the summer for orientation, I had to make like a video for the first year students. And I asked one of the film OLs, Alex Kendall, I was like, can you just teach me how to use this camera like really quick so that I don't need to make you use it each time, so that I can use it for the rest of the time. So I would set up the tripod every day. I would take out the SD card. I would use Final Cut Pro, like all that stuff. And like, that's all self-taught stuff. And like, which I think is pretty cool, but it's just tough when I don't have like a specific experience, like organization wise or like class wise, to be like, I know how to do all of this and this and this. Like a lot of it is just like, just trust me, bro. Like I've been working on writing since I was like a kid and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can very much attest to sometimes feeling a little unqualified in the world of film as someone who transferred in here as a junior and is taking my first film classes essentially here. So I very much understand exactly what you're talking about. But, you have that ambition, unleashing your ambition.
Okay, Quinnipiac.
So, yeah, and just kind of being self-made in that way in terms of just taking the initiative and learning. Yep. And those are all great traits.
Oh, well, thanks. That's the goal.
Yes. And since we've talked about orientations a lot, why not talk about it more?
Yes.
So I'd like to ask your experience as an OL and what that taught you.
I loved being an OL. The first year that I was an orientation leader. Well, actually, let's talk about me becoming an orientation leader. So, some Paige lore. Like dad lore. This is Paige lore. So before I came to college, I forget like what it was. I think I saw honestly Sacred Hearts, like they had a video of their orientation leaders, and I was like, people that exist to have fun with like new students and like introduce them that like aren't tour guides. I was like, that's crazy. No, right? I was like, I want to do that. And so I had told myself, regardless of what school I went to, and my parents knew this too, like regardless of what school I went to, I was going to be a tour guide and I was going to be an orientation leader. I was like, I don't care where I go, they need to have both of those things. And I don't even care if they're good programs, I'm going to do both of those things. Because of course, like going on tours and seeing the people on tours and being like, they know everyone, like they do all these things, they're so nice and kind. Like, I want to be that person. That's so awesome. I want to like be a reason why someone would want to come to a school, or would want to stay at a school for like orientation wise. So at the end of my freshman year, I applied for orientation. I went through the process and I was on the alternate list. So the alternate list works like with RAs too. You're not technically on staff. You're not outright rejected, but you're not technically on staff until someone that was on staff originally drops out, or like if someone can't do something anymore, they have an internship, blah, blah, blah. And I was told by all of my then orientation friends, because of course during orientation I connected with my orientation leaders the most. I connected with like some of my friends too, of course. Actually, fun fact, I'm going on a tangent, but I'm going to remember what I was talking about. Yeah. Fun fact, my first friend here at Quinnipiac, he lives with my now boyfriend, who I did not know until sophomore year, like the end of sophomore year. So like I knew this person, his name is Garrett. Shout out Garrett Bear, love you. So he was like my first friend at Quinnipiac. I had like gone over to like his room freshman year, like we had like hung out like a few times. We were like more like online friends at that point. Sophomore year, we were still like friends, blah, blah, blah. I met my boyfriend Max, shout out Max, in admissions, which is a whole other thing. I meet so many people in the things that I do, but I met him in admissions and I found out that he lived with Garrett. I was like, oh my God. And then like once we like started talking and blah, 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 I found out that him and Garrett have been friends since middle school. And that was just crazy to me. I was like, oh my, it's, I don't know if you've seen on TikTok like that invisible string theory. Like it's kind of like, it's a Taylor Swift song where it's like, it's a concept that like everyone that you meet throughout your life is connected to you by an invisible string, and you'll find them whenever you need to find them. And so for me, like meeting him was like my invisible string thing. But anyway, Garrett was one of my first friends at Quinnipiac for orientation. I just think it's funny how like he's essentially the reason why I also then met my boyfriend. But I applied, alternate list. All my friends that were OLs were like, that's okay, Paige. Like, it's fine. Like, people always drop, you'll get on. And then I did get on staff. I was so happy, but I did feel like I had something to prove, which I did, because I was like, I wasn't on staff originally. I want to prove to everyone that I belonged on this staff in the first place, which isn't, I don't think, the intention of the alternate list, but all the other alternates on staff that I had talked to were like, alternates just want it more. Like, we just want to be on this staff more. We want to be orientation leaders more, which is honestly why so often we are alternates, because once we get off the alternate list, we're going to say yes. And so I did feel like I had a little bit to prove. And I think that I was a lot my first year of orientation. I think that like every OL that is theatrical and sometimes kind of like goes through that transformation where they realize, there's like a moment where you realize, oh, like being an orientation leader literally isn't about you. Like you know that it isn't, but then sometimes when you get like caught up in like being an OL and wearing the polo and like being excited and like making first years do fun things with you even when they don't want to or whatever, like you kind of lose the fact that like this it is truly not an experience about you. Like, you had your orientation. You had your time for it to be about you. Now it needs to be about your first years. So I think my first year on staff, I kind of needed to learn essentially like a time and place for being theater Paige is kind of like what I describe her as. Like, theater Paige is very like, she wants to be front and center. She wants to be in the spotlight. She wants to be all of the things, and she wants to do everything and like prove how great she is at everything. So like, that's theater Paige. And that was me very much so in high school. And then kind of learning how to like dial that back, because not everyone likes that, you know, not everyone likes when like you're super loud and in front of everything. And I think that I did dial it back a little bit too much my second year, where I kind of like felt like I almost like lost a sense of myself. And I think that I found a good balance of it now, which I think is in part because of orientation for sure, and like learning just how to deal with different people of different leadership styles who may not like how excited I get at certain things, or may not like certain like attention that I may draw, or the fact that like I will speak in front of crowds of thousands and like I do not care about that, and that does not scare me, and like it scares a lot of other people and stuff like that. So I think in general, like people that are okay with like getting up and doing stuff like that are not always going to be universally liked, which is fine. I think I've come to accept that I won't be universally liked. Very hard, because I want to be liked by everyone, but like it's okay if I'm not universally liked. But for my second year of orientation, once I was the returner, I kind of had a new perspective of what it meant to be an orientation leader. And then so that year I focused all of my efforts on making sure that my first years had the best time possible. I was like, I don't care if I get the recognition from my boss or the other orientation leaders. Oh my God, Paige, you're such a great orientation leader. Like, look at you. Like, we're going to give you we do a thing called U-Rock, where we like commemorate an orientation leader that did a really great job during a session, who like is often overlooked. So it's like a purposeful like recognition for them. I was like, I don't care if I get any of the recognition. I mean, I care a little bit, but I was like, I really like want to make sure that even if I don't get the recognition, I will be okay having just been a good orientation leader. And that year I had connected with so many, like with my first year so much more. I knew all of their names better. I really like knew them. I felt like like throughout the year I was going to see them, and they were going to like want to say hi to me and want to like hang out with me more and like be a resource for them. And then 4 of them ended up on the orientation staff when I was an intern for orientation. So like, for me, I was like, that just proved to me that like I did do something right my second year. So I was very happy that I changed my focus, because then I talked to all of the returners, or as many returners as I could when I was an intern, that like as a returner, like really just focus on your first years, like really just focus on them having a good time and your partner having a good time too, and your partner learning things and growing, because like as a returner, you know how to be an orientation leader. You don't need to learn how to do that anymore. You have to teach your partner how to be an orientation leader, and now you really need to teach your first years how to be first year students. And then as an intern, I learned a lot about patience. It is very hard to be responsible for a group of 20 peers who all have different personalities, and I really loved my intern group. Mobile games, they know that they're my faves. I think we were the best intern group, but other groups will disagree. But I really just wanted to make sure that the one thing that I wanted to do with my intern group was to make sure that we had like fun. Like at the end of the day, like it's really not that serious, you know? I think that in my third year I was like, you know what, this isn't really that serious. Like it's serious, and like it's important that like you're kind and you're nice and all that stuff, but if you're having fun, like you're going to be those things more likely anyway. Like you're, especially if you feel like supported by me. So what I wanted to do was just make sure that at the very least my intern group felt like they had me, and like we were a cute little group and stuff, and that like we were bonded, and that they did trust each other and trust me too. And I feel like I did a really good job at that, and making sure that like I was building that community with my group, and that they knew that like they were doing an awesome job. Like I am not someone who is like, I don't really ever understand like people who are like sparse with like validation or like positive reinforcement. I think that it like creates a very toxic cycle of being like, you have to earn my respect or you have to earn my praises. Like I would much rather be like, I'm going to tell you that you're doing a great job if you're genuinely doing a great job, and then if you stop doing that or aren't doing that, I will also still tell you that. Like I don't think there's a reason for the assumption to be that you're doing poorly and then you're doing well without like communicating that. I feel like that happens a lot in theater too, where it's like when your director's like, as of right now, we don't have a show, or like something like that. Or it's like, I can tell that nobody knows everything, like nobody knows anything. And then like once in a while they'll be like, Paige, you did great. And then you're like, oh, really? I haven't gotten a compliment in years. Like, this is crazy. So I always tried to make sure that like they didn't feel like they had to grovel for compliments from me. And I think it did make their work better, because I think that they knew like Paige is going to tell me if I'm doing something incorrectly. But she also has been telling me all the things that I'm doing well too. And I don't think that's a bad thing. So I learned a lot about patience. I learned a lot about how to lead my peers too, which I think is really helpful. And just like being someone's boss is like a weird thing to do. But it was great. And then I also, of course, learned how to use the Z190 camcorders that are from the vault. So that was another thing that I learned.
Wow, you went through the whole thing.
I know. I told you I was giving you the lore.
Yeah, that was a lot of great lore. And you said not being universally liked. If there's people who don't like you, send them to me. I want to find out why.
I know why some people don't like me, and it's fine. I'm fine with that.
But yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about is that you talked about how being an OL, that it's not all about you all the time. It kind of made me think that it's a lot like acting in that way, where it's to not, at least what I've been learning in an acting class is, it's not all about, it's about the material, it's about the people you're with, it's about servicing the story. Mm-hmm. I mean, acting is life,
yeah,
of course, but like especially relating it to OL, it very much is. And you talked about talking in front of all those crowds, and the first thing I was thinking of was really early last semester with like the bingo, when we were in the by the gym, in the place behind the gym,
yes,
the big, and you were up there,
yeah,
and sometimes there were boos and and things like that.
Yeah, the first years did not like me this year. I think I also had to accept as an intern that like the first years weren't going to like me in the way that they did when I was an orientation leader, because as an orientation leader, that's your friend, that's your buddy, that's your comrade. You see them on stage, you're like, oh my god, that's my OL, like look how cool I am, I'm friends with my OL. The interns are the people that you go to if you're a problem. So like I think I had to also come to terms with the fact that like people weren't, like first years weren't going to just universally like me because they might have associated me with like being yelled at or being scolded rather than like being fun. So that was interesting. And then I realized, I was like, why is everyone booing me at bingo? Like bingo is my thing. And then I think it was at that moment where I was like, maybe I need to retire from calling numbers at bingo. Like maybe that's what needs to happen. And it sounds silly, but I like came to terms with that in August for orientation. And I was like, maybe my time is up. Maybe I'm not the same that I used to be.
Hang it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember all the bingo sessions. Fly like a G6.
Like a B6.
I think it was a B6. Yeah, not even G6.
Yeah, it's B6. It's B6. I love the jokes. They're fun.
Those were always fun. And it was kind of like I said, it's fun when I was a junior transfer, didn't really know anyone, all these cool events to go to. And those were always fun.
Yes, SPV was a lot of fun when I was part of it.
And now, and that leads us perfectly into your experience with SPV and what that taught you.
SPV taught me a lot. I think SPV is the first. We're gonna go through lore again. My freshman year, I lived in Dana. I was in a double, and my roommate, in like the middle of our spring semester, had decided to move out because dealing with COVID was a lot, and she was just like upset that like she couldn't do as much. She was like, and she was in nursing, so she was like, I don't want to get in trouble for anything. Like I'm just miserable here. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But then I spent the second half of my second semester alone in my room, which was not really awesome as a freshman. So I decided that I was going to get even more involved in SPB. The smallest amount of time I spent in my room was like good. I would make sure that I was like out as long as possible, doing anything else, and I had already like known about SPB, and I was now on the executive board for SPB for my second semester, because there were 2 open spots, and me and my friend were like, we're gonna do those spots, and we thought we weren't gonna get in because we were freshmen, and then we got the e-board positions, and I was like, okay, cool. So e-board freshman year, boom, ready. Spent as much time in the SPB suite as possible, at events. I would go to everything, and it became my home. I wanted to join SPB in the first place because of the orientation leaders that I knew were in SPB. because they had called bingo. I had seen them at trivia, and like I just wanted to be like them. And I was like, I know you guys from orientation. They were like celebrities in my mind, you know. And then they started to talk to me, and I was like, and now we're friends, and like you're part of this really cool organization that plans events and like does the bingo. Like that's super cool. And so it was great. Freshman year, I had an awesome time. Sophomore year was not great. Sophomore year was when things went downhill, which makes me sad because it's like I had like one really great year of the organization, and it just felt like I have been trying to catch up to that even now, and like still have never properly caught up to what it used to feel like. But sophomore year, I was a vice president, which is a lot as a sophomore. I was the vice president of membership. That's what it was called at that time. So I ran the G board meetings. I was responsible for like checking emails. I was just basically like the outreach coordinator for SPB. I would be the word of mouth. And like even now, like even when I'm not on the board, like people still associate SPB with me because I am like, I was the biggest advocate because that was my job. Like that was my position.
I know, I still do.
Yeah, right. But I loved it. It was my thing. Like it was the thing that I did, and I loved what we stood for. And I loved how it felt like an extension of orientation for me. It felt like so often, like for first years who didn't have anyone and didn't know exactly what org to get into, SPB was the place for them because it was general enough that anyone could go to the events and be like, this is fun. But it was also a very tight-knit community. So like that's what I loved about it. But sophomore year, I had a lot to learn. I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore who didn't know how SPB ran pre-COVID, didn't know what to do during COVID really. So like it was a learning experience. And I think that the most difficult part was that someone at the time who I had looked to as a mentor and had looked to as someone to guide me through that, being just a sophomore when they were a senior, was not doing that. I was actively doing the opposite. Anytime I would make a mistake, or anytime the board would make a mistake, or a mistake that I wasn't really involved in, but because I was a VP, I had to like take the fall of it. It was always Paige was doing something wrong, and Paige needed to fix what was going wrong. But then also anything that I did to fix it wasn't enough or wasn't good enough. And like, I just felt like I was chasing the entire year, just like trying to get their respect back. Like, never mind just like their friendship back or like their appreciation, just respect back. And like that didn't happen. So sophomore year was awful because I felt like I didn't have any of the other VPs or it was the president, which is the worst part of it, is that it was the president. Like I just feel like that was just difficult to deal with. And like, once again, I'm not saying I was perfect during it either, but I was also just like, I just turned 19. And even now, like nobody's going to be perfect now, like even as a senior, but it just felt like I just needed a lot more guidance than I got. And then anytime I made a mistake that I felt like I made because I didn't know what the right protocol was like all my fault because I should have known better. But it's like, how was I supposed to know better? So like sophomore year sucked. I started having problems with my roommates. I started having like friendship like everything was just going wrong sophomore year essentially. And I was like, I wasn't really liking the person that I was becoming, and like other people weren't liking the person I was becoming. I moved out of my suite. Like I almost left SPB then, and didn't. And so that was really awful. That was really bad. Then going into my junior year, I applied for the VP position again, and I didn't get it. I got another chair position, which I ended up loving. I just didn't love how it was done, because I applied for just VP positions and then was just given a random chair position. I'm like, at least let me reapply. You know what I mean? Like, at least like give me time to reapply. But I did love that position. It brought me back to actually planning the events, which I think is what I needed my sophomore year. So I was the traditions and community chair. I was responsible for planning like weekly events. So like Hollow Week, all of our Hollow Week themed events. Spring Week was my week. Winter Week was my week. And that was just fun because I got to be creative. I got to have validation with how people enjoyed the event rather than looking to my peers instead. I felt like what sophomore year was difficult was that I still hadn't known how to accept like that I'd just done a good job by like knowing that I did a good job. Like I needed someone else to confirm that, you know? And that wasn't happening. So then my junior year, I was like, I'm just gonna find it in other places, like in the work that I do. And that's why I think that like my second year as an orientation leader went a lot better too, is that like, I was like, no, like if I need to be able to know if I've done something well and not need someone else to confirm it all the time. It's nice when someone confirms it, but like not need that to feel like I did a good job. And I think that once again, I grew a lot in like trying to make sure that like what I had experienced sophomore year didn't affect me, which was really hard because it's hard when you're still in something to have it like to pretend like it's not going to affect you. So it was difficult because there were still people, it still felt like that presence was there and that I wasn't going to like be able to escape from like the mistakes that I had made or like the people who hadn't helped or hadn't really liked me. So then once again, I almost considered leaving and then I didn't. And then going into this year, I was like, I'm gonna apply for president. I wanted to be president since I was a freshman. I really did. That was something that like me and my like friend who we'd like done everything SPB together. We were like, I'm gonna be president and you'll be my VP. And that was like what we've always said. And I didn't get president, which sucked. I do think that it was hard to talk about what I had experienced in the org without making it seem like I was holding a grudge against the org itself. But it's hard not to, I think, at the same time when it felt like on all sides, like everyone in the org didn't like something that I was doing, so then I'm going to associate the org with those bad feelings. But I tried my best. Very unfortunate that I didn't get it, but I was still a VP. I was the VP of engagement, which is basically membership under a different name. So I got to run G-Board again. I stayed for my G-Board because they reminded me of my first years. I met a lot of first year students who I'd seen at orientation, and then I saw them come to G-Board, and that just made me very happy because I could exist once again with letting like my work show for itself rather than relying on a title of like president or relying on even anything from like the other executive board members or like someone verbally saying to me that I was doing a good job. I could just let my work speak for itself. And I feel like that got me through last semester. I met amazing people. I like definitely healed my relationship with the space and with the organization a lot more than I had in my junior year and especially my sophomore year when I was going through all of it. So it became a safe space for me again. And it still is a safe space now. I thought that with stepping down that I was going to have to go through a whole other like year of processing, like being like feeling like I was wronged and all of that stuff. But I think that because I had experienced those things before, I was a lot better prepared to be like, I'm going to step down because I need to make a choice for myself. And it prevented me, being an SPB prevented me from doing theater. I wanted to get back to theater like for years now, and I haven't, and that's because of SPB, simply because of the time commitment. I wanted to do QU tonight. I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to do other things that were more closely related to my major and what I wanted to do in life. And so at the end of the day, like my stepping down wasn't personal in the way that I thought it would be in like the last 2 years. Like the last 2 years where I was like, I'm leaving this org, it was because I wanted to leave because I didn't like how someone did something or like I didn't like how they treated me and I wanted to leave to like burn bridges and be like, fuck you guys, like I'm leaving, have fun doing this without me. But I genuinely think that the decision that I made to step down now was because it was the best thing for myself and because I also knew that I couldn't be the best VP that I could be because I still had all of that baggage and I still had all of that stress in it. My heart wasn't in it as much as it was before. So, yeah, that's a very short version of SPB. I do love the people in the organization. I love the work that they do, and I wanted to make sure that when I stepped down, I didn't burn any bridges. I didn't abandon anyone. I tried my best to like make sure that they knew that like I wasn't doing it because I had like problems with them or that I had like it. I just think that there were some infrastructure changes that I would have made that haven't been made in the past 3 years, and I just kind of got tired of it, you know? I think that for people that are younger and just starting in the org, those things don't bother them, but like I've been here since a freshman, and so when I see certain things that haven't changed yet, I'm like, there's a point where I need to step out of that, you know? And that happens in any organization too that you've been in so long. Like right now, like I'm living the life because I'm part of these other orgs for like a semester, and I'm like, I don't care about any of the infrastructure problems in these orgs because I won't have to deal with it. But like being in that and like feeling like it was a job and like still not being able to change things that I wanted to just like really sucked. But I hang out in the suite still. I plan on going to even more events. I can win events now, which hasn't happened since my freshman year. I won like the first event I went back to, and everyone's been like so supportive of me. So like I really do wish them the best. It just sucks because I get like mad at myself and other people that nothing went the way that I wanted. You know what I mean? Like nothing went the way that I wanted.
Yeah, it was quite the arc of highs and lows that you put very maturely.
Thanks, I try.
And that's just the thing about this topic, like student-run orgs. It's weird working
Yes.
with your friends, and when your friends make decisions that impact you so heavily, that can be influenced by other people. I don't want to say popularity contest stuff, but
you can sometimes.
Sometimes you can sniff it out.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're still all like young adults. Like we think we're adults, but we're not. Like we're all like a bunch of kids running like group playtime together, and like things are going to get personal, things are going to get messy, and like as much as everyone wants to say like I don't do that, as much as I want to say I don't do that, like it happens sometimes without our realizing. It's just a matter of like noticing when it happens again and like trying your best to not do that.
Yeah, it's just the human natural thing to do. Yeah. That, like you said, at our age, we're kind of running these things, and I'm sorry that things didn't go the way you wanted to, but kind of like the invisible string you talked about, perhaps that kind of led you, that string pulled off in the direction you didn't think it would, and it led you to some other places, like Quinnipiac tonight. I was going to ask what led you there, but I think we just figured that out. So I'd like to just ask kind of how you've been enjoying it.
I really love it. I love being funny and I love being silly, and I think that being in Q tonight has confirmed to me how much I love to perform, which sounds so silly, but like I love to perform. I love to like, you know, like when those stage lights go up, I'm like, oh, this is like where I belong. Even if it's on TV, even if it's not on a stage, like a stage that isn't like a big theater stage. It's on the Piazza stage, but it's not like on like a huge like stage with like a wing and stuff like that. But I also just think that like being able to like pitch ideas, to just kind of like get in an environment how I would feel like I would want to do in the future, be in like a sketch comedy environment, be in an environment where you're pitching things to people and like you pitch a bunch of things and you see which one sticks, and like knowing that like sometimes like when I've had like I think like one pitch be chosen to be a segment, and like that makes me so happy.
Feels like you're on top of the world.
No, right? I'm like, you guys chose my pitch. Like that's so great, and I love that. And like seeing like how Grace does the writing, and just getting to perform it too, and like have people while we're filming be like, oh, like you did that so well, or like that was so funny. Like doing cast practice, I love just like doing improv. Like I just love being a theater kid. I think at the end of the day, like I think that in college I was like, I need to hide my theater kid self. You know what I mean? Like I need to like be something different. But like I love being a theater kid. Like it's so much fun. I think that especially now that I have hopefully learned more how to like know when to like tone it down a bit, or when to know to give other people like their flowers and other people their spotlight. Like it's so much fun, and I get a lot of joy out of it, and I think that I'm relatively good at it too. So but yeah, I wanted to join Q tonight specifically because sketch comedy is just so much fun. So much fun.
I would say that you are very good at it.
Oh, well, thank you.
As I saw firsthand, because you were on my first shoot as an AP, and I was kind of thinking a lot of time when you were there, like, wow, it's funny how this all started when I was a kind of a junior and you were an OL.
I know.
And then to find ourselves there.
Yeah.
I wanted to have that moment during my shoot, but I was a little overwhelmed.
I know, yeah. I was like, I'm just gonna. Well, that's too. I was like, I'm just gonna. Whatever he asks to do, I'm just gonna stand right here and then wait for him to. But you did great with your.
Thank you. It was fun, and and I'm glad that you found it. I'd also. I know we talked about it in the past. I was like hyping it up to you.
Yeah.
Can I take a little bit of credit for you deciding to join it?
You can.
I can.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, for sure. You can. You can have that credit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have that moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm glad you found it, and I'm glad you're having so much fun with it.
I am. Yeah.
Kind of taking advantage of this time in your last semester.
I know. I'm like, well, that was another thing too. I figured like with SPB, I was like, I'm not having fun anymore. Like I'm not having fun in the way that I used to. It's not serving me in the way that it used to. And like sometimes you just grow out of things like that. Like even if nothing had happened to me, like if I had just simply grown out of it, like that would have been fine too. Of course, there were like other reasons and like other like built up, like maybe I needed to address a little bit of like trauma that happened and stuff. But that aside, like I think that growing out of it was like, that's just what happened. I grew out of it. I wanted to do something that I knew I was going to have more fun with. And I'm having so much fun. And I also feel like much better prepared for my future because I'm doing something other than SPB. Like as much as it seems like I do so many other things like at the school, when the school year starts, it was always SPB. And I never knew like my Quinnipiac identity outside of SPB. And so getting to discover that this semester in particular has been really interesting and rewarding because I think that I'm realizing a lot of ways that I said before, like maybe I am actually qualified to do certain things and like maybe I can actually do these things, and being an SPB has like sort of limited me in that way.
And also I feel that to look on the bright side of your whole experience there, I feel like that really prepared you for real world
Yeah, that's what
to have.
That's what my parents always told me. They were like, well, now you know what it's going to be like to like work in a real life setting. And I'm like, I know, but yeah.
It doesn't make it easier in the moment.
It doesn't, but I'll hopefully be better at handling it.
Yeah. And you'll know that it'll always lead you to the right place.
Agreed. Yeah. I am a huge believer in like everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, the right place, like into the hands of Caitlin Turner here at QU tonight.
Ah, yes. Mother is mothering.
And you're talking about being a theater kid.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you about your involvement in the theater program and the show you're putting on at the moment.
Yeah, well, so our show actually ended last weekend, which is fine, but which was great. I just love it. I love being in a costume. I love being like a character. It was a comedy, so like when people would laugh at like the silly things that I would do, like it's just like I think that that's the type of like there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than like being in a funny show and having people think that you're funny, because it's the worst kind of embarrassment when you're trying to be funny and nobody thinks it's funny. Like that's worse. Like when you're like trying to make a joke and you're like, this is gonna be so funny and everyone's gonna love it and nobody laughs. Like I would
got the whole squad laugh.
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. It's like so much worse to have that. So then when you actually do have those hits and you're like, yeah, I was really fucking good at that. Like I was really funny. Like that was a really good show. I was doing a really good job with that. Like it's just so much fun. I also like with my character, I just love like clearly because I love to write too. Like I just love figuring out who my character is. Like I gave my character a little southern accent, even though she was supposed to be from Salt Lake City. I was playing like a character within a character, which is like I think my typecast, because I also did that in high school too. Like I think that my typecast is very like, oh, like the character that I'm playing is very ditzy and blah blah blah. Just kidding, she kills and robs people and like. I don't know what that says about me, but that's like the typecast that I play. But yeah, I gave her a little southern accent and then I dropped the accent and stuff. But it was just fun to figure her out and like give her a personality, and then feel myself like be that person. And like that's just the best part of theater. But I joined too because my roommate Christina, shouting out everyone today. Shout out Christina, I love you. And my other roommate Emily, shout out Emily. She also was like, you need to do theater again. Like, it's what you want to do. I know that you want to do it. Like, you need to leave SPB. And I was like, no, but I don't want to. And she was like, no, you have to. Like, I know that it's not making you happy anymore. And so knowing that, like, already knowing Christina in theater and she's the president of Fourth Wall. So I was like, okay, I know her. I feel like I can enter this space a little bit better, a little bit more naturally because I know someone already. And she also encouraged me too. She wanted me to do it so bad. So it was great. I loved it. And I loved my cast and I loved everything about it. It was awesome.
Awesome. And from Comic Sans as well. If I'm thinking of the right Christina. Yeah.
Yes. I love her. Yeah. She's like my best friend. I love her so much.
Yeah. We have ourselves a character actor here.
Yeah.
That's interesting when you talk about doing comedy. You're doing a lot of it right now.
I know, yeah.
But especially kind of what you're doing on the stage. Comedy acting is very interesting because you're supposed to be acting like you're not trying to be funny.
Exactly.
But the lines, of course, and the tone of the play is funny. So there's a great art to that.
Yeah.
And that I feel like can oftentimes not really be appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I actually talked about this in my class right before this, is that like I feel like so often like people are willing to like not give comedy actors their flowers, but
Until I do drama.
exactly. But like I feel like comedy actors have such an easier time doing drama and like do so well in drama, but it's much harder for a drama actor to do comedy. And so like I like rattled like Adam Sandler, Steve Carell, Robin Williams. Robin Williams is like my inspiration. I wish every day that I would have a chance to meet him, and I never will. Like he's like, you know, like those questions of like who could you have dinner with, dead or alive? I'd pick Julie Andrews and Robin Williams. Like that's my dinner party right there, and I would be fine for the rest of my life just talking to them. But like comedy actors, because honestly, I hate to say it, but like drama's like sometimes easier to do because the emotions are a lot easier to tap into. Usually it's a lot more connected to like real life, and also like
Quieter.
Yeah, quieter. And like when you're doing comedy, the big thing is that you can't laugh at what you're saying. And like if you find something funny, like you need to be able to like hold it together and like pretend like it's not funny, but also not force it. Like it's so much, in my opinion, it's so much harder to be funny than it is to be dramatic. And film and theater people everywhere might disagree with me. They're like, well, I can cry on command. I'm like, well, I don't care. So I don't know. I think comedy is very hard to do well because you can tell when it's forced and it's awful to watch.
Very much so. And I often feel like comedy's not rewarded a lot with awards. Like that's why I think
Or musicals,
yeah. That's why like I have to admit I have not seen Poor Things, but Emma Stone winning Best Actress, I know her role kind of had a bit of comedy in it.
Yeah.
It's kind of more dramedy elements, but like even thinking like, well, this is gonna be funny, but like Ryan Gosling going for Best Supporting Actor, and Robert Downey Jr. I think very much deserved the award.
Yeah.
But I think one could argue Ryan Gosling, like what he was able to pull off in Barbie.
He did amazing.
Like
yeah.
we were in one of my film classes, we were analyzing a scene from Barbie, and we kept watching it, pausing it, and every time I look at Ryan Gosling, I just start laughing.
I know he did so great in it. That's the thing too. Like there are so many like talented actors. Like Ryan Gosling does drama. Timothée Chalamet. I think they should cast that boy in comedy movies. He's always some sad, malnourished like teenager. Like he's always playing the like intense roles. I know in Dune he's playing like super intense. Like he's always doing intense things. But like I see him on SNL and he's so funny, and like I'm like get more dramedy, like get more dramedy going on. It's so funny.
I think like him and Lady Bird.
Yes.
He plays a good loser.
He does. He does. Have you seen Don't Look Up?
I have not, but I know he plays a Twitch streamer in that movie.
Yeah, and
that's
he's
kind of perfect.
So funny in that movie. He is like perfect in that. Him and Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence, I love her. She too is like
underappreciated.
Underappreciated. People know her from like The Hunger Games and like her dramas, but like she is hilarious. No Hard Feelings, hilarious. Like one of the funniest movies ever. John Cena is surprisingly like such a great comedy actor.
Peacemaker.
Cock Blockers. Love that movie. I want to see Ricky Stenicki, which has him in it too. Like stuff like The Neighbors. Like there are things where it's like they seem so dumb, but like some of the writing is just like genius because it's funny and you can tell that it's like genuinely funny, like just the things that they are writing.
Yeah. And especially like with John Cena, how like Peacemaker, he's kind of funny, goofy, big like freedom. Yeah. But then it's like you kind of you throw the drama in. I don't want to say not undercut isn't the right word, but like when you hit the people with drama, it works too.
Well, that's the thing about comedy as well, is that like to a certain point, like in most, especially in like dramedies, the comedy becomes like very real, and then you're like, oh, like shit, like this is a little bit intense. Like I wasn't expecting this, and then it's like that's where they get you, and then you're laughing like 2 seconds later, and then you think about it. Like I think that I feel like comedy has like a like, oh, comedy is mindless, comedy is stupid, and like some of it is just genuinely to be like silly and fun, but like first of all, let people be silly and fun. Second of all, a lot of comedy is like more of a social commentary than like a lot of dramas are, in my opinion.
It can say as much, if not more.
Exactly, because it's satire. Satire is so interesting to me.
Yeah, and a lot of comedy actors can become great filmmakers too. Like I think I don't know if you've ever seen Barry, but Bill Hader going from Saturday Night Live to doing Barry, a show on HBO, where he's acting and writing and directing it. It was incredible. And of course, like Jordan Peele going from doing sketch
Literally.
comedy, which could have been seen as dumb,
Yeah.
and then going and being
Key
a
and Peele
really
skits are amazing though.
yeah,
So
they
funny.
really
Yeah.
really are, and then becoming an acclaimed filmmaker. So
Yeah.
there is like an interesting pipeline of how comedic actors, performers can go on to do some of the incredible things,
Yeah.
like yourself.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I just wish that we took like even like just comedy actors or creators seriously. Like, I think sometimes of like a lot of SNL people, like Will Ferrell and Kristen Wiig, like I love them so much, and like they are mostly, I don't know if they've done like anything really dramatic, but like they're known mostly for comedy. I think they're hilarious, and like it's being willing to make fun of yourself, which is I think really important. Like I think that especially after the many years I've been here and like all of the other things that I've done at this school where I've had to worry so much about what I present myself like, I just want to be able to like make fun of myself and not really care anymore. Like I want to just be able to like do silly things and like look stupid and look silly and stuff.
That's the evolution.
Yeah, it's the
You went from drama to comedy.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
You did the hard part.
Yeah.
Going from drama to comedy.
Yeah, look at me. I'm already there.
And now, since we're already kind of drawing these conclusions, I'd like to ask you, if you have one takeaway from being involved in so many things at college, what would it be?
That people are really complicated, which sounds obvious, but I don't think that I truly realized it until in all of the different friend groups and leadership groups I've been a part of, that like people are really complicated. And I think that that's why something that like may have happened my sophomore year, when I was going through my sophomore year, thought of it as a very black and white situation, but like everything is gray. I think that everything exists in a gray area because like emotions aren't easy like that. Everything is complicated. And I think that once I realized that, I've been able to give myself a lot of grace as well as like other people a lot of grace too. And I think that it's helped me with approaching like tough conversations now. Like I feel like sometimes people think that I like can't have hard conversations. But I think that just what it is that I think they think that like I actually don't know what anyone thinks, but I can't know for sure unless someone tells me, of course. But like I take like any constructive criticism or like if I hurt someone's feelings or something, like I take that very seriously, and I think that sometimes it could seem like, oh, I don't like confrontation because like I'll start crying about something. Like I think that crying about something that you care about is like not a weird thing to do. Like I think if anything you should be flattered that I'm crying about like if I made you upset and I'm like upset about that. Like that if anything just shows how much I care about, you know what I mean? And, like I want to change this thing. So I feel like being involved in all these things have taught me like how to have hard conversations with different types of people and how to be on the receiving end of those conversations as well as initiating those conversations, especially being in leadership positions where I've had to like be in charge of people or be the boss, and being like, how do you approach a conversation like that? How do you make, I feel like with everything I just sort of like, I try to approach things, honestly at times I try to approach things now where I'm like, how would I have rather been approached than I was? How would I have rather been treated than I was? Like for SPB, for like last semester, I honestly stayed because I wanted to give people a better experience than I had. And I was like, and I want to make sure that like that doesn't happen to anyone. It doesn't happen to me again for sure, but like doesn't happen to anyone else again too, because like it sucked and it was awful. And that's not like what the org that I know and joined stands for. And so similarly, like if someone's doing something wrong, or if someone like is asking too many questions or talking too much or like doing something that I also have like seen myself do wrong and have been told in a way that wasn't productive, I'm like, what productive way could this have been said, and how do I say that to someone? Which like it doesn't always work because once again people are different, but I do think that there's a lot of value in like putting yourself as much as you can into an empathetic kind of like other person's shoes lens. You'll never walk a day in someone else's shoes, but I feel like general kindness and empathy is something that you can achieve, that is more universal across the board. Like I think that in general people don't love you coming up to them with a conversation to be had where it's like, you did this wrong, fix it, and like that tone, that exact like phrase, like providing no advice on how to do better. not understanding maybe like where they're coming from. Just, you did this wrong. I really hated it. You need to fix it. Like, that's not productive for anyone. I don't think anybody would prefer that. So I feel like I've tried to lead with kindness. That's like been my like, that's been like my mantra this year.
Gotta
like,
kill 'em with it.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I want to make sure that if someone for some reason like has something to say about me, that I can say confidently that I have always been kind and that I've always done my best to not perpetuate any problems or to just solve things, and make sure that I'm not continuing any of these problems or like any gossip or stuff like that as much as I can, because once again, like, people are complicated. Like, it's hard to do that all the time, but I try to make sure that I'm always like, if anything, I led with kindness.
That's a very poignant thing to say, and something that's kind of been on my mind a lot. One thing you may not know about me, I'm a textbook overthinker.
Yeah.
I overthink everything, and sometimes when that comes to people, where like I could have an interaction with someone that could feel a little off, and I think, oh, this person not like me, they could just be having a bad day.
Yeah.
Or something could just not be right that's going on. And that's something that you kind of just have to realize sometimes.
Yeah.
But I really like what you said about kind of leading with kindness, treating people better than you want to be treated. That's kind of how you fix things like that. I know you've talked about kind of trauma. Those are things that kind of carry down. So you kind of stop cycles of that, so to speak, by kind of taking the right lessons from poor experiences.
That's the thing, is that I was like because I all the coldness in my heart, I have it. I was like, I could take my bad experience and make it everyone else's problem, or I could make sure to the best of my ability that I am not the reason why it happens again. Or, yeah, like, essentially, like, I am not the reason why it happens again. Like, I am a huge fan, breaking the cycle anywhere you can, but I also get how it's difficult, too, and it's difficult when something's been done for so long and, like, changing that. But I think that something else that Matt Kurz, I shouted him out before, but something about Matt Kurz that I absolutely love is that he always asks, like, why we do things. Like, in organizations, like in orientation, for example, he's like, why do we do this certain thing? Does it serve us anymore, like, as an organization? Is it productive in the way it used to be, or do we just have it because we've done it for 15 years? And being willing to let go of old traditions like that, simply because they're not working anymore with the current board that you have. Like, I get keeping, like, there are, like, some traditions that I feel like are always going to stay in every organization, like really cute ones, like team bonding stuff or like little chants and stuff. But, like, there are practices that simply do not work anymore. Like, you have to be willing to let it go. Letting things go, I've also gotten used to, just like, sometimes you just have to be okay with not liking the outcome of something or not liking the feeling that you get from something, or with, like, overthinking something. And sometimes you just have to be like, you know what? This isn't going to take up my mind anymore. I am not going to think about it.
Gotta let loose.
Yeah, no, right? Yeah. I'm going to try my best to not think about it.
So, yeah. That's definitely a better answer to this question than it kept me busy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to be able to kind of understand people and to kind of realize that some things are meant for one part of your life and sometimes not for the next.
Yeah.
Like La La Land.
Yeah, exactly. I also think it's helped me realize, too, about, like, the concept of a fishbowl. And, like, if I want to be in entertainment in some way, there are going to be people that are looking at me very closely and are looking for something to go wrong, or looking for something to criticize me for. And once again, being okay with some of those things, because sometimes criticism is just criticism and people hate you because they ain't you, one of those things. But also other times it's like you need to be careful about things. And, like, part of me gets worried, like, talking about SPB at all, because so, like, even, like, here, like, as I was talking, I was like, like, shit, like, I probably shouldn't. But I think at the same time, like, I think that I don't think that I shared anything that was, like, extremely, like, untrue or, like, super crazy and controversial. I just shared my experience. People already know about it. It's just tough sometimes because, like, there are times where I'm like, I don't really know who to trust, and I don't really know, like, who to talk to about things. And it's frustrating because sometimes I'm like, I just won't talk at all, or, like, I'll only tell, like, my boyfriend something and that's it. But, like, that can get exhaustive, and, like, it doesn't help you let go of things. So I feel like the more that I'm, like, willing to be able to, like, talk about things and, like, not be afraid of, like, okay, if someone shares this, like, once again, as long as I know that, like, I spoke my truth and, like, that I was honest about it, in any way that I could be, and that I was also kind about it and like as mature as possible about it, then I can't worry about what happens. But it's just stressful. It's stressful to feel like you're watched at all times. And I still feel like that. I still feel like all the time people are like watching, waiting for me to do something wrong, waiting for me to say something and then be like, Paige is this and Paige is that and blah, 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 blah. But I think it just comes with like, honestly, like being a student leader and like being, like making yourself known. I think that happens. Like that's just a natural thing that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always people who want to tap on the fishbowl.
I know, and I hate it. It's
the haters.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of like you said, you put yourself out there. One thing I always say, there's always pros and cons to everything. And one of the cons of that are the people that'll cause those kinds of issues. But it's finding the right people, like you said, that you can tell things to, and the right places, like the Zicast, to talk about. And I'm glad that you were comfortable enough to kind of talk about that here and have that dialogue.
Yeah, I would rather do it in like a space like this than like to someone randomly with like everyone, even though this is going to like get posted and stuff, and like of course I'm like okay with all of that stuff as long as it's not like out of context. Like I just get worried sometimes of like things being like out of context, or especially when talking about SPV, because like my experience has been so precarious, and like I literally get like it's like Vietnam War flashbacks, like thinking about like having anything that I talk about like be used against me in some way. But I think also at the same time it's like it's not going to make anything like less hurtful that happened, you know? Like, and I think too, like, hopefully I've made it clear that I really was just trying to do things for myself, and regardless of making mistakes or regardless of maybe not always being the best leader or person, like I at the same time like didn't always feel supported, and like that's still true. I think another thing is that I learned that like two things can be true even if they contradict a little bit.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to be open about things like that bother you because of the factors of people involved, but it's always good to be honest, and it's always good to put those kinds of things out there.
Yeah, I've been trying to be honest. Lots of things that I've been trying to be this year, but honest for sure, and also honest and like understanding of gray areas. I feel like when I tell like, you know, like your side of the story, I always try to make sure that I tell something in a way where I understand that it is just my experience, even if that is just as valid as anyone else's experience. Like you can only talk about your experience, but it can also exist in contradiction to something else. So like something could go wrong at like an event per se, and like you could have a reason why you didn't do the thing that would have fixed it, but that doesn't mean that the thing didn't still go wrong, you know? Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I feel like that's another thing that SPB taught me. That it did teach me a lot, that organization, for sure.
A lot of lessons. And I kind of want to ask you some things people may not know about you, even though we just got into a lot of that.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty open book, honestly. I feel like the things that people don't know about me are more like the things that bother me like that, because I feel like I've been very worried in the past about making sure that those things don't like get out, or that like I'm not seen as gossiping or something like that. So I feel like that. Trying to think of what else, because once again I feel like because I'm such a yapper, like I say everything all the time. I try to live as like true to myself as possible. Like you know what you're getting when you first meet me, and I'm probably going to tell you something about something I'm hyper fixating on like within 5 minutes of meeting me.
That tracks.
Like that. Yeah. So I feel like that. But most people know that. I'll talk about like, especially if I just had a class like, and I was like yapping in that class, or I really liked what we were talking about, you will hear about it, even if we don't really know each other. I guess I think that, well, I mean, I feel like this is true for like a lot of people who are like, who like want to do student leadership and stuff, but like, it's at the end of the day, I'm like, I do really care what people think about me, and that's the hardest part about like doing stuff like this, or like doing stuff like Q tonight or SPB for as long as I did, or like even orientation and stuff, like being okay with people perceiving you, and like not being able to get rid of the worry of whether they like you or not, or what they think about you. But also, like, once again, at times just having to be like, you know what, at the end of the day, it's fine. But also it's not. I'm an overthinker too.
Yes.
Yeah. So like even now I'm like, I'm going to be overthinking everything that I say on this. Simply because I feel like sometimes I like can't trust myself. I'm like, was I mature when talking about that? Was I saying things as like honestly as possible? Did I embellish things? Like stuff like that. I feel like it's always like a constant going back and forth of like, did I actually do my best to make sure that like nobody could genuinely fault me for something? Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm always living in that fear, and I hate it. Like, I want to not feel that. I think that in some ways it's like good to essentially, like, you have to censor yourself sometimes, but also at the same time I'm like, it sucks.
A yap essential crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I love to talk, and I love to like share my experiences, and like I'm also very open about my experiences with SPB too. Like, I think that most people that know about me in SPB know that I've had a rough history with the organization and with some of the people in the organization. I think that it also has felt so taboo in the past to talk about those things, because then it feels like it's still happening, and then it feels like it's just going to bite me in the ass right again. So then part of me is like, I just won't ever talk about it. But then if I don't, then I won't ever get over it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's like very easy to be like, oh, just like get over it. I'm like, without talking to like anyone about it.
It doesn't quite.
It doesn't quite. And like, I don't know. And sometimes like it doesn't take just like one person who's heard it the same, like a million times. It doesn't take just like telling like, you should tell your therapist about things. Like, I tell my therapist about things. Like, she knows about all of this. But like, it always, like, sometimes it takes more than that, you know? Sometimes it takes more than just like one or two people to know about it. And I always find value in like talking about things multiple times over, simply because like you learn something new about the situation, you learn something new about yourself. Maybe like you're like, oh yeah, what I did there was like not so cool. And at the end of the day, I learned from it regardless, but that doesn't mean that it still didn't suck and that I still hated some parts of it and that it still like hurts, even if it hasn't happened in a while. Like, it still hurts. There's still a part of me that hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're letting it all out.
Yeah. On the Zicast.
On the Zicast, yes. Yes, but of course, it's all going to pay dividends moving forward in terms of what it teaches you. So I'd like to ask you, what are some of your hopes and dreams, professionally or in general?
Professionally, I would just really love to create. I'd love to create things, writing, performing, drawing, I don't know, anything. I would just really love to be in a profession where I can create things and have that be my job and be successful in doing that. And like being appreciated in doing that too. I feel like sometimes people like aren't, not really, but I feel like sometimes people aren't willing to be like, yeah, like I'd love to be a celebrity for something that I do, but like I'd love to be a celebrity. I think that I've had experience with being just like an on-campus celebrity sometimes. Like a lot of people, like sometimes I'm like, how do you know who I am? And like, I mean, it's a super nice feeling. Like, I once had a mom walk up to me in the M&T Center and being like, "You're Paige, right?" And I'm like, how do you know that? Yeah, no, I'm like, how do you know that? But like, I think that as much as it's difficult, I think that you could do a lot of good with like a platform like that. And I feel like I would really want to do that. I'd really want to be like someone who creates things and is like appreciated for creating things and is like well known as someone who is like kind and mature and like learns from mistakes and stuff like that. And I don't know, I feel like it's a goal that like a lot of people don't want to admit that they have sometimes. And even I don't want to admit that I have it sometimes, but like at the same time I'm like, yeah, I feel like I want to be famous. Like, that would be awesome. But not just famous to be famous because of like a talent that I have. I feel like there's a difference, you know, like to be famous just to be famous is like one thing, but I want to be famous for like a talent or something like that, or for like being really good at a lot of things, and like that's what it is. And then like helping other people who are really good at a lot of things, like be really good at a lot of things, like for everyone else too. So I'd say professionally. I'd say personally, I would just like to keep, I don't know, growing and learning, and hopefully not be as scared to speak my mind, but also like, I don't know, but not be like too harsh with things. I just want to keep becoming a person and an adult.
You do have a great celebrity name.
Thank you.
Paige Pezzella. It rolls off the tongue.
Thanks. I don't need to have a stage name.
the double P's as well. It's like the phonetically smooth.
Some alliteration going on.
Yeah. It's like you were born for it.
Stop it.
the destiny like we were talking about.
Yeah.
And that's a great answer.
Invisible strength. Yeah. I feel like always like weird saying it because it's like, oh, you want to be famous. I'm like, yeah, what if I do? Like it would be fun. Like especially like being in the arts. I'm like, is that not the goal? Like because you want to be like as appreciated as you possibly can be for the work that you do. And for some people it's like, I just want to make stuff. Like, yes, I just want to make stuff. I just want to be creative, but also like being in a creative field, like it's hard to be as appreciated as you can be unless you are like a famous creator. So I'm like, I feel like that just comes with wanting to do the job sometimes.
Yeah, it's great to know people appreciate what you make.
Yeah.
And of course there's gonna be, like we've talked about, the people tapping on the glass, which would be a downside, but of course just be able to be known for the work you do, that does sound like the dream.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I get people I don't know saying, "Oh my God, you're the Zicast."
Yes,
I'm like, "Yes, I am."
Yeah, you're like, that's me. Yes, exactly.
That's literally me. Yes.
Yeah, I'm like, you are right. Like people will come up to me and be like, "Oh, you gave me you gave me my tour," and I'm like, "Yes, I did." Like, are you here because of me? Like, that's great. I love that. But it's nice because like it feels sometimes that it has like very selfish roots, but at the same time, it's like someone appreciated like something that I did for someone else. Like that makes me feel really good, and like that's really awesome.
That indeed is.
Yeah.
It's the goal, and now I like to ask you what I call the golden question, which are what are your favorite movies?
Mean Girls. I love Mean Girls. Mean Girls is such a good movie. It is so genius. Like some things are of course like there are always problematic things with older movies like that, but like I think like early 2000s like chick flicks are like the way. Bring It On, Clueless, Mean Girls. Their rewatch value is just off the charts, absolutely insane. They're also just like really fun. Some other movies that I love, Bullet Train. I love Bullet Train. Black Klansman and Get Out are like favorites of mine in terms of like racial commentary. Black Klansman has some issues with it has some things, but I think that they're fun, but also like there are moments where you're like, oh my God, like this is really real, and it makes you think. Barbie, I loved the Barbie movie. It's just so fun. Little Women, 2019, Little Women, My Roman Empire. I love that movie. It is so aesthetically beautiful. I love the entire cast. It made me fall in love with Timothée Chalamet. He is amazing in that movie, and he looks great in that movie. Trying to think of what else. I mean, I love Harry Potter. I love the Harry Potter movies too. I'm trying to think of like, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the original one with Gene Wilder. My family and I quote that movie all the time. So there are like certain movies that are my favorite movies because my family and I watch them a lot, and those are like our vocal stims, like as a family. We always are like, strike that, reverse it, or like, I'm a trifle deaf in this year, next time speak a little louder, or like stuff like that, just like Gene Wilder's like quick quips. He's another comedy and drama actor that I exalt, and I'm sad that I will never be able to meet him and Robin Williams. Robin Williams, Julie Andrews. I know Julie Andrews is still alive, and I hope she's alive for much longer. At a Table, and me. That would be great. I would love that.
Isn't that the dream?
That's the actual dream.
A lot of great movies, a lot of very Paige movies.
Yeah.
You're talking about kind of chick flicks from the early 2000s. 10 Things I Hate About You.
Love
Does that come to mind?
10 Things I Hate About You. Yes, because it's also a Shakespeare adaptation. Modern Shakespeare adaptations are so good because Shakespeare was funny. Like people forget that like the comedies, like maybe you like don't really understand all of the language and stuff, but like they're supposed to be funny because they are funny. They're hilarious, and like they have the same like raunchy like sex and fart jokes that like Adam Sandler movies do now, and like it's just crazy to think about, and it makes me appreciate Shakespeare. He knew what he was doing.
And the way they change over the years, too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, that's a very nice selection of films.
Thank you.
So kind of with that all said, is there anything you'd like to kind of leave as like parting words?
I don't know. I feel like I got like a lot deeper than I was going to. But then I realized that like, I don't know, wear your heart on your sleeve. I feel like it's important to be like your full, complete self. And, you know, people are complicated. But yeah, no, this is so much fun. I love it.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for
thank
having
you.
me.
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it was nice to kind of have you on here. Like I said, one of the first friendly faces I saw here.
Thank you.
And it's kind of crazy where we've come.
Yeah.
And where we'll go.
I know, invisible string.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just growing and growing.
Yeah.
So of course, so as always, this is Ryan Ziaks with the Zicast, where everyone has a story, signing off. Thank you so much for watching.